There's only so many tests on audio you can do before you have locked it in. So we are locking it in right now. And we are getting the show started. Welcome back. It is the Saturday Snap Count, hosted by me, by Scott. It's a great week. We are recapping this past weekend on today's episode. This is the Week 7 recap show on Monday night, 9:20 p.m. It's a great week. And there's one reason why. That is because we went 10-3 this past weekend. It is by far our best weekend so far. Always happy about 10-3. If we could do 10-3 every week, we'd be in a different business. But we're not quite there yet. But a lot to talk about on tonight's episode. We've got recaps of the past weekend. We've got freestyle. We've got our top 10. And we are going to look ahead to week 8 of college football. And we even got 3 predictions locked in. And that's right, 3 predictions locked in on Monday night. Stick around to the end. We will get to those. As you guys know, if you've been around, the Monday night episode, usually releasing on Tuesday, is the shorter episode, or it should be the shorter episode. So stick with us tonight, and then we will get back on Thursday with our predictions for Week 8. This is one of my favorite nights of the week. I love doing this. As a disclaimer, as always, this is a prediction show. We do this for fun because we love college football. We are not condoning gambling, promoting gambling, or partnering with any sort of sports book. We are doing this as a hobby. I love to watch college football all day Saturday. And if we're lucky enough to get it on other days of the week, we watch it then too. And then in our free time, we spend time researching these teams, researching these games, figuring out how much we can possibly know about these teams, because it gives us something to root for. Because if you're like me, you grew up in the South, you see the flag behind me. I root for one team and one team only, and that is the Ole Miss Rebels. That's my diehard, who I want to win every single game. And if every other team lost every game, I'd be totally fine with that. But the reality is other teams got to win too, so why not find reasons to root for them? So that's what we do on this show. So again, disclaimer, we are not a gambling show. I do not condone you to gamble or ask you to use my predictions to gamble. This is just for fun. But we do use the spreads that Vegas provides for us so that we can find edges and find ways to set ourselves apart. Because if you listen to me, just pick winners every week, it'd be pretty boring. So we're doing this for fun. And that is your weekly disclaimer. So let's move on and let's get the show started. What can we start with tonight? That's a good question. I gave you all the topics. Not really sure where I want to start. I don't want to hit it too early with our 10-3 weekend, but I got to decide. I can't keep you waiting. Let's do our top 10. Let's go a little bit different tonight. Let's start with our Saturday Snap Count top 10. That is where we take our very own beliefs and ideas and we make our very own top 10 without any sort of inside or outside influence. It is simply what we believe and who we believe are the top 10 teams in the country. And I'm going to shake it up by doing them first, but I'm going to shake it up twice by doing them backwards. So I'm going to give you the 10th team first, and we will work our way up to number 1 because number 1 might surprise you. So let's start with number 10. We have a new entry into the Saturday Snap Count top 10 this week. They have never been on the Saturday Snap Count top 10, which is approximately 5 weeks old. My normal viewers know that pause was a water break. I have something wrong where when I get to talking, my mouth dries out pretty much immediately, and I've got to have a water nearby. So I apologize if you're new. I'm finding new ways to put the episodes out, market the episodes every week, trying to do it as organically as possible. But each week I'm kind of putting them out there on more channels and posting them on more of my accounts. So I anticipate by that logic to gain a couple more viewers a week. So forgive me if you haven't been around and you don't know what the show's about other than just being a college football show, but I take a lot of water breaks. So, matter of fact, I'm going to go back for a second. But if it is your first time, we do our own top 10. We do our own predictions on this show. We give them all out. I'm the only person on this show. This is a single man solo show. We won't deny anyone on the show. If anybody wants to be on the show, we'll always allow it. But this is typically just me. And we talk about games twice a week on Monday nights and usually out by Tuesday morning. And then on Thursday night, usually out by Friday morning, we will give our predictions. That show is going to be strictly predictions. And that's what we do all week. And then I spend the rest of the time throughout the week trying to prepare everything I can for the show. So if you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy it. Always leave feedback, leave comments, and like and subscribe and follow where you can. We really appreciate it. And again, this is just a hobby of mine, and just finally got the courage to put it out there, be vulnerable, be transparent, have the conversations that I have at the water cooler, at the coffee machine, at work, over the phone, everywhere. Just put them onto a microphone and put them out for everybody to see. Why not? I do it enough already anyway. So without further ado, let's get back to the point that I originally started. And we have at number 10 in our top 10 this week, we have the Tennessee Vols. I think people are sleeping on the Tennessee Vols a little bit, and there's I won't say a good reason, but I will say it is very confusing to me that they're not getting talked about as much as they are. I have them at number 10 simply because of one reason. They continue to play well. They continue to score a lot of points, which in my opinion goes a lot longer than having a great defense. I think great defenses pushes teams over the edge to give them a chance to win national championships. But in terms of who can beat who and who's the better team between this team and that team, I think having a good offense where you can put up close to 30 to 40 points a game like they do makes it really easy for you to beat people when you're not having your best days. So number one, they continue to score points and do it well and do it efficiently and do it all sorts of ways. Makes it hard for anybody to play defense against them. And number two, they are one field goal away from beating Georgia, who is widely regarded as one of the top 5 teams in the country by pretty much everybody. Every poll, coaches poll, AP poll, the JP poll, shout out Josh Pate. All these polls have Georgia up there, and rightfully so. They have a great history, great legacy in the game as of the last decade. Kirby Smart's one of the best coaches in the country, and so I just don't want to. I don't want to let it go by that they were one field goal away from being undefeated, and if they probably make that happen, they're probably in the AP, probably top 4. I don't see why they wouldn't be, if not maybe top 3. So I have them at number 10 this week. I still think the teams above them have a good chance of beating them on a neutral site. That is kind of how I do my top 10. I use it strictly on body of work. It is not prediction based. It's not what I expect these teams to do. It is simply what have you done this season? Who have you beaten? How much have you beaten them by? And then if we take that information and then say if we put all these teams on against each other on a neutral site, who would win? So I have Tennessee at number 10. Number 9, Oregon. I know I kept them in the top 10. That's because I do see lots of potential there. They have a really young quarterback in Dante Moore who is really, really good. Had probably one of his worst games of the season so far against Indiana, but that's kind of the team that they are right now. They're beating everybody. They're doing everything super well. But when you look past that, Oregon is still one of the most talented teams in the country, and I give a lot of value to coaching staffs because they play a much larger part in this game than what people give them credit for. And Dan Lanning's one of the best in the business. So I have them at number 9, even though they did lose this weekend. At number 8, I have Georgia Tech. They've been sleepy as well, just kind of getting by everybody. They've had one game, just like Tennessee had one game against Georgia that made everybody forget about them. Georgia Tech had one game against Wake Forest that made everybody forget about them. But after they beat Clemson, everybody was talking about them. They jumped into the rankings after that game, and I think everybody wanted to pay attention to them. And then Wake Forest happened, and then everybody said, well, we're just going to push them aside for now. They'll make their way back if they really earn it. But I'm not like that. I look at teams for their entire body of work, and I keep my tabs on teams, and Georgia Tech is one that I'm keeping my tab on. I think they have a potential to make a deep run if they play up to their potential every week, which so far they are. They had the one game against Wake Forest. I don't count it against them because I think Wake Forest has a pretty good defense, especially at home. So they went on the road and did that. So I have them at number 8 because I do think they fight against Oregon at number 9, and I do think they fight against Tennessee at number 10. It's that simple. I'm not saying necessarily that team is way better than Oregon or way better than Tennessee. That's why they're close to each other in their rankings. I think it'd be a great game with both of those teams. At number 7, if you can believe it, I have Ole Miss. Yes, I dropped them down from number 4 to number 7. It was a completely disappointing game, and I don't want to get on my soapbox here because that is my team. That's who I root for and die for in this game. But I was very disappointed. Now, anybody that knows college football like I do and doesn't watch on a surface level knows that that's not the team that we are. That's not the potential that we possess. That is simply the definition of a look-ahead spot with Ole Miss. They're looking ahead to Georgia. They have to go on the road to Georgia this week, and everybody in the world that has any sort of inkling of knowledge of how this game works and how coaching works in this game and in this sport knows that they were preparing for Georgia to the point where, number one, they weren't quite as prepared against Washington State as they normally would be, like an SEC team. And number two, I think there's lots of reasons to believe that they were keeping it pretty vanilla, play calling wise. Why are you going to throw your best plays out there the week before you play against Georgia, one of the best teams in the country, arguably your hardest game of the year? If we can get past this game, we are through the hardest part of our season. And so when you look at it, it's totally feasible. And obviously I'm biased. So I'm going to tell you why I think it wasn't their potential and not just the identity of who we are. I'm going to tell you that it was a fluke, but I'm still not going to give you special treatment because this is a non-biased podcast, a non-biased show where I give credit where it's due to every team that deserves it. And I also will take my very own team, Ole Miss, and I will move them down to number 7 after being at number 4, and they did not lose, but that's just who I am. That's called integrity, folks. I got it. I got it right here. I'm pounding my chest for all my podcast listeners. So I have them at number 7. Breaks my heart. Do better next week. Alabama, number 6. I have moved them up because they continue to answer the call after the disappointing loss against Florida State in week 1. I think they got a wake-up call super early. Very rarely do you get wake-up calls in week 1, but they got a wake-up call in week 1, and they have not looked back since. I know the game at Missouri this week was a little bit closer than what people anticipated. If you were predicting for Alabama to win that game, it certainly was closer than what I was hoping it would be or predicting that it would be. Not that they were going to go in there and blow out Missouri. I think a 3-point game on the road that came down to the last drive for Missouri definitely wasn't what we were expecting. But proving yourself, passing your test throughout the week, especially in the SEC where that conference is week after week after week, test after test after test, they have passed ever since. The Florida State loss is aging as poorly as any loss can right now. But that was week 1. All these teams are so much different than what they were week 1, and I'm not going to demote them because of that, because I do believe there is a part of the ranking, really any ranking, where, yes, you should drop when you lose, but there's ways you can work your way back up depending on what you do and depending on what other people around you do. And not only have they done better and better each week, but the people above them are losing and losing and losing. So, yes, naturally and organically, I have them moving up to number 6. Texas A&M, number 5. They look super impressive. They are the number 1 team in the SEC by the ranking currently. They overtook Ole Miss for that spot after Ole Miss, as we said, kind of laid an egg against Washington State. Texas A&M continues to beat good teams, or at least decent teams in the SEC, teams that are deep, teams that are talented. They continue to pass those tests, so I have them moved up because they are very impressive in what they're doing. They're scoring lots of points, hanging in there, and then just kind of rolling past teams in the end. And that's a skill that a lot of teams would die to have, to be able to actually pull away from teams. Lane Kiffin has talked about Ole Miss liking that at times very frequently, where we can get ahead and then we can't really pull ahead when it really matters, and they do that very well. So I have them at number 5. Number 4, Texas Tech. We're staying in the state of Texas. I've said this last week. I said it the week before that. I say it week after week. Texas Tech just continues. Excuse me. Whoa. Texas Tech continues to surpass expectations. Now, we talk about a team getting better and better each week. Texas Tech continues to just get, and they're like, if there was a word that had more emphasis than better, that's what I would say. But for now, I'm going to say they get better and better. They are absolutely rolling teams when they get tested. They get picked for Vegas to have these spreads, and then they're like covering those spreads and then covering them again. They're like double covering every game. It's really insane what they're doing. I think they're kind of proving the model wrong as far as there are select teams out there. Texas Tech is like this. Ole Miss is like this. Indiana is like this, where they're very transfer portal heavy. So people kind of expect them to eventually fall apart because they have a lack of high school player development. They have a lack of chemistry because your rosters have so much turnover. But Indiana, Ole Miss, Texas Tech continue to kind of take that narrative and squash it. And Texas Tech has squashed it as good as anybody has this year, except for one team we'll get to in a second. But they look so good. I mean, I said this last week too. They're a Big 12 team that looks like they fit right in the SEC with the style of play they have. They balance out their attack. They throw it, they run it, they play really good defense, and they beat you in multiple ways. So I'm probably most impressed with Texas Tech so far, but just not to the point yet where I'm going to put them up in the top three simply because their strength of schedule isn't all that high. They played Kansas and they played Utah, which are two really good teams, and even Houston, three really good teams. But I really would like them to play a very high profile team at some point. I don't know what their schedule looks like. Maybe that's coming. But for now, I think they're going to be number 4. Now, number 3, 2, and 1 have been the same every week with a different order up until this week. We have a new entry into the top 3, and I'm sure everybody at this point can expect who that is. But number 3, I have Miami. They've done nothing wrong. They've done nothing to necessarily drop out other than just other teams proving that they deserve the top spots more than they have, but I still think they're one of the best teams in the country. Really, at number 1, 2, and 3, it's really 1A, 1B, 1C. I don't believe that there's any sort of disparity between these top 3 teams, but I have Miami at number 3. Ohio State at number 2. They continue to be extremely impressive. As much as it pains me to say that, I'm probably the number 1 Ohio State hater in the country. But what they do is impressive, man. They're extremely skilled on defense with Matt Patricia. You hear it from one coach after another every week when they play. That's the best defense they've seen in years. It's a defense that they are not used to seeing at the college level. It's very complex. It's NFL style where they can adjust to certain things that you're just not ready for as an offense. Offenses will face them, kind of get an idea of what they're doing, and then they change it immediately. And then it's like before you can adjust, they're already on to something else. They attack you a bunch of different ways. And then that leaves number 1, Indiana. I said it last week too. I hate Indiana. I hate the way that they carry themselves. I hate, hate's a strong word. I really don't mean to say it that much, but Kurt Cignetti is one of the most impressive coaches in the country. I don't mean for every coach to be out there, daisies and rainbows and all that and be super funny and super charming and super nice. Like we have some coaches again, no bias intended, but I think everybody loves the social presence of like Lane Kiffin and Dan Lanning and guys like that who not only are very good at what they do, but they're also very entertaining. And I think Kurt Cignetti is not that. He's very good at what he does without being entertaining at all. He rubs people the wrong way. His interviews are very harsh, sometimes very rude, but it's just who he is, man, and he proves that he wins. He took an Indiana team and completely turned it around in a year and a half. He was in the playoff last year, and this year it looks like they are heading right back in the same direction. Beating Oregon on the road was about as impressive of a win as anybody has this year, so I have them at number 1, and that will round out our top 10. A very good list. It's a good list. And it's going to change next week, and it's going to change the week after that, and it's going to continue to change because there's so much parity in this game right now. There's so much dispersion between each team. There's so many opportunities for teams to make jumps and teams to fall big, and it continues to happen every week. We used to look at upsets like they were a rarity, and now it seems like we're getting at least 1 or 2 every week from teams that we're just not expecting to do that. But that's the landscape of where we are now. That's where we are. You have players going back and forth, school to school. These players are getting paid a lot of money, and that's just where we are. The power balance is here. It is evident, and so that's what it's going to do. It's going to cause us to have different rankings every single week. You're not going to have one team stick around the whole time, except for the very, very top elite echelon, which, like I said, as of right now, is like the top 3. Everybody else, anything could happen. So that is our top 10. I guess we'll go into freestyle. It's probably the smallest topic or category we have this week. Really, the main points in freestyle this week is just going to be number 1. We had 2 firings this week to top on to the 3 or 4 that we've had in major college football already. Obviously, Penn State fired James Franklin after just another abysmal performance, and it was time to do this. Don't let anybody tell you that it's not. Everybody who is not on the side of letting him go is probably the people who look at the record as a whole and look at the year and the season as a whole, and they're not looking at individual performances. Whereas I and most of the more knowledgeable college football personalities out there in the media can tell you that regardless of the year that they're having, Penn State, with the amount of resources, the amount of history, and the recent experience they have, should not be losing three in a row to UCLA, Oregon, Northwestern. Those three. The Oregon loss is explainable. It is expected by some, and it was very much in their grasp that game. They could have easily won that game, but UCLA and then Northwestern at home is completely inexcusable from a team at that caliber. With the amount of money that they're pouring in, with the amount of resources they have, they're a top Big Ten team every single year. Again, partly due to what James Franklin has done, but when you prove time and time again that you can't win the big one, at some point a change has to be made. And there's only so much change you can have within the team as far as the players goes. And there's only so many assistants that can fall on the sword before you have to make a real change. Now, should it have been done in the middle of the year? That's not my question to answer. I don't have the answer to that. They paid a lot of money to buy him out, and they're gonna pay him. I think I saw the term end on that was 2031. So they're paying him a lot of money until 2031. It's going to take out a lot of money from their NIL. Some people think it's going to set them back for good, kind of until that time ends and until they can kind of recoup some of those funds that they're using to get him out of there. But for them, obviously, it was important enough to give it a shot. And I think if anything, they're probably calling it in this year and going to work on getting them back in the next couple of years. But who knows, man? The Big Ten is changing so much with Indiana playing the way they are. Ohio State is continuing on their trajectory. They're doing it more of a traditional way where they're developing high school kids. Oregon with Dan Lanning is never going to be out of the question. Michigan with Bryce Underwood, who's a freshman, who's arguably going to be one of the best quarterbacks as we go along down the road. I mean, the landscape of the Big Ten is changing, and Penn State does not have to be part of that conversation. That is not a guarantee, and it's not a mandatory thing. Any team can jump in there, and so I think we're reaching a point, especially with NIL and the way resources are shared these days, that programs aren't afraid to let you go. And it's unfortunate. It really is. I have a bad problem with humanizing some of these coaches. Not that they're not human, but, I think about it as far as like it's their livelihood. It's the way they support their family. It's what they want to do. It's what they're really good at. Obviously, if you can get a job at this level, you're one of the best in the world at what you do. And it really is unfortunate when, you're getting booed and you're getting, I'm sure he's getting death threats. I'm sure he's getting all this hate speech, and it really is upsetting because I tend to look at James Franklin as another person. I don't elevate him to this level, but that's the way it is. It is unfortunate. I made the comment to a friend of mine this weekend, like, imagine if somebody showed up at your job when you're having a bad day and, screamed at you the way they scream at him. And then he made the counterpoint to me, well, Scott, I don't make millions of dollars doing it. And I said, you know what? Good point. So I don't condone, doing what they did to him the last couple of weeks. But then again, it's just the business. It's the nature of the business. It's not personal. It's just a matter of, hey, we pay you a lot of money to do this job and to do it exceptionally well, and you're not doing it. So I hate the way it went out for him, but it did. I think he's going to get another job soon. He's too good of a coach. He did too well from an overall standpoint to not get another job. It's just a matter of if at his next destination, can he win the big game that he could not do in the Big Ten? And I don't have the answer to why he could just never really get over that hump. He just couldn't. But sometimes a change of scenery is all you need. Other news in freestyle, as far as coach firings go, UAB let go of Trent Dilfer. I think that was just a bad experiment waiting to happen. I think people assume that coaches with illustrious professional careers and long-standing careers as a player automatically translate to coaching success, and it obviously does not. It did not in this case. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not really sure. I mean, but UAB being the program that they are, not something that I would think really would be, a top job necessarily. But we just still, add those two to the long list that will only get longer of programs needing a head coach. And we'll see. This is going to get pretty crazy because as this list gets longer, there's not that many coaches to go around. There's not many coaches in the landscape of where we are today with revenue share and how much some of these coaches are getting paid, that just because you are who you are doesn't mean you can just offer anybody and get an acceptance. Um, you know, Everybody that opens up their coaching job at the Power 4 level says, well, we want Signetti, Lanning, Kiffin, all these guys. And it's just like, man, it just don't work that way anymore. I heard, people, and, inevitably, I'm sure Florida job will open up. And there's other jobs that are probably, inevitable to open up as well. A lot of people are saying Auburn's going to open up eventually, and there's just not enough coaches to go around. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. But yeah, I mean, we're just not in a time in the sport where you can say, hey, like for example, Penn State can't just go, hey, we're Penn State, we want you, so come on. It don't work like that. I saw that Signetti was on top of the list from, obviously not from Penn State, but from people who, believe what they say is the truth, and they believe they know how this stuff works, and they're putting Signetti at the top. Who's to say that he doesn't just want to stay at Indiana? I mean, you're in the same conference. I mean, you got like a great example of this. SMU. SMU has top 10 boosters that give top 10 type of money, and nobody would ever expect it, but it's how it is. And there's a lot of programs like that would catch you by surprise with how much money they get coming in from their boosters, from their collectives that make these programs go. And a lot of these schools are coughing up the money as the coaches are asking for it. So therefore, these coaches that are really good that would normally maybe use schools as a stepping stone are just okay with being where they are. It's easier for them. They have families. They don't want to uproot everything just to take a little bit more money. Because a lot of times, too, you look at Penn State. Now, James Franklin was there long enough to say, maybe the leash is a little bit longer, but I've got family that are diehard Florida fans. I wouldn't want to be the coach at Florida. You have crystal clear examples of how your leash is extremely short at Florida. They want to win right now. They don't have patience for you to build up your program. They don't want to wait on the processes and the systems you have to get implemented. So why in the world would anybody want to go if you're already an established coach somewhere with chances to win big games? Why would Kurt Signetti want to move from Indiana to Florida just because it's Florida? It just doesn't work that way. This is where you have to find these coaches, and you have to really dive in and put your eggs in their basket and say, man, we believe in you, we trust you, do your thing. And some programs have longer leashes than others. Some programs will say you got 3 years. Some will say you got 5. Some will say you got 10. And that's just how it is. So it's going to be interesting because there's going to be a lot of openings. We're at like less than 10 right now in, major college football programs, and the list is probably going to go north of 10 before it's all said and done. So I guess that is freestyle. I don't think there's anything else huge in the making. We're 1 week closer to the college football playoff rankings. That is something that nowadays I cannot get enough of. That's my favorite time of year. You get into November. We're getting into the later half of the season. You start to get these playoff rankings coming out. And it's like when you lose, you want to see how far you drop. When you win, you want to see how far up you go. And it is an exciting time. And I think there's going to be a lot of moving around this year with how good teams are. And it's going to be fun, man. I can't wait. But I guess the only thing we have left, other than our card for next week, is our card from last week. I'm surprised I waited this long. I can't believe I made it this far without talking about it because we had our best week of the year. And that's why I am going to try to put this episode out to more places than I normally do because I want to bring attention to the fact that I had the best week of the year. And I love it. I can't get enough of it. I keep looking at my graphic that I made. I made a new graphic all because of this to celebrate. And I simply cannot wait to talk about it anymore. So let's get into it. Let me pull it up here. All right. 10-3 on picks we gave on the show, predictions we gave on the show. Again, if you, under your own accord, used my predictions last week to gamble, congratulations. You probably made a lot of money. That's not why we're here. I'm not telling you to do that. But yeah, it was a great week. So I'll start from the top and we will go down from there. And we may talk about some of these games more individually. Tulane -6.5 on Thursday was a hit. That one came down to the last drive. I'm not gonna lie, I'm sitting there. I watch these games when I predict them because I want to know if my prediction is coming to fruition, if what I'm talking about really actually happens. Most times it's just like a culmination of what I've seen and stats and what I feel. And man, there's nothing quite like, again, this is why we do this, because I can make a prediction on Tulane and then I can go watch them. And although I don't normally care if they win, I can actually like root for them to fulfill my prediction. So it's really fun. And that's the whole reason why we do this. But Tulane -6.5, I was sweating that game. And you look at the stats, I mean, I have them handy right here. So let's pull them up. So it was 26-19, covered right there at the end, just by the right number. And it's crazy, man. You look at this game like it was 3-0 the first quarter, then it was 9-0 in the second quarter, and you're like, okay, I mean, this is just going to be a field goal off, and we're gonna field goal them to death. But it's just enough for us as long as the defense continues. And then you look up, and in the third quarter, East Carolina scores 16 points, and I was like, oh gosh. Here we go. I mean, this is where we are. And Tulane blanked on the third quarter, of course, so they had nothing in return for the 16 points. ECU scored, but then they come back in the fourth quarter, score 14. And the last drive of the game was what we needed to reach that number, and we got it with the touchdown, which was awesome. It was super fun. But then you look at it, I mean, you look at the numbers, that's what makes it so crazy. The game was close. It came down to the very last drive to fulfill the prediction. And you look at it, first down, there was 2 first downs separating this team. East Carolina had 22, Tulane had 24. So they're both moving down the field. Third down efficiency wasn't all that bad for East Carolina. They were 10 for 19 on third downs. Tulane was 3 for 10, 30% on third downs. That typically doesn't win you football games, at least from an offensive standpoint. But then you look, and Tulane had over 100 yards, 118 to be exact, 118 more yards on offense. So it's like, whoa, where does that come from? How does that not translate? They had 458 yards total offense. They had 362 in the air. And then you look at East Carolina. So obviously the 362 covers most of their yards for the game. East Carolina had 180 in the air and 160 on the ground. And you're like, man, that's not that bad. I mean, it was pretty crazy. I mean, I think ultimately that's what kept them in the game. They just obviously couldn't get into field goal range. They're getting a lot of those yards on the back half of the field and then not really converting from there. And then where the biggest difference is, Tulane was averaging 9.8, so almost basically 10 yards per pass and 4 yards per rush. I mean, you do that, you're going to beat most teams unless they're just stacking up to it, which East Carolina was not. And then penalties were pretty similar, but Tulane gave up significantly more yards in their penalties, which obviously kept East Carolina in the game. So, and Tulane had the lone turnover. So the numbers were super weird in this game. Like, you can look at the score and say one thing, and then you can look at the stats and say another thing. And then ultimately what matters is Tulane got the job done and they fulfilled our prediction. So great start of the week. I had a feeling that after that on Thursday night, being the lone game on Thursday night that we predicted, I had a feeling we were going to get to a good week. I really had a feeling. And then we got to Friday. And Friday we had USF plus 1.5 on the road at North Texas. I told you on Thursday of last week that North Texas was getting way too much value. People were looking way too heavily into their 5-0 record, even though their strength of schedule was in the negatives on that scale. And I told you one thing that I do truly believe is that when you get teams to a point where they're undefeated and they have their first test of the year, Vegas tends to just throw them a cookie, give them a good number, and hope for the best. And that's what they did in this game. They gave North Texas the slight favorite just to say, hey, congratulations for getting to this point. But obviously it worked out in our favor. We do have the stats for that game as well. So we will pull that up. It was a 63-36 game. It was very lopsided. There was tons of points in every quarter. Let's see, 21 points. This is total. 21 points in the first quarter, 21 points in the second quarter. Quick math, 30. golly, this is embarrassing. 30 some odd points in the third quarter and 22 points in the fourth quarter. So this was a points bonanza, or as Big Cat from Barstool would say, a points fiesta. And then when you break their stats down, it is much more lopsided, as you would expect. Most everything was pretty similar, except for they had over 100 more yards than North Texas did total. What the really surprising number, North Texas had 326 passing yards. That's a ton of yards against a really good South Florida defense. But the Mestamaker kid for North Texas is going to be pretty good. I would be shocked if he stayed at North Texas for his entire career. But he's just a freshman. And they throw the ball a lot there, so obviously that inflates the number just a little bit. And he did throw 3 interceptions, so who really knows how high that number could have got. But he obviously outgained USF in the air. They still had 274 yards for USF in the air. USF had 9.4 yards per pass, which is obviously really good. Only 1 interception to Mestamaker's 3, so they win the turnover battle. And then what really shocked me, probably of all the stats we broke down from this past weekend, this one got me the most. USF had 306 yards on the ground. You know how crazy it is to have 300 yards on the ground? I mean, that's like unheard of almost in this game, especially a game where you gave up 36 points on defense. I mean, it's crazy, but you score 63. They got to come from somewhere. And so obviously they outgained them significantly, by 200 yards. And North Texas only had 97 yards on the ground. And the averages were about the same per play. And then there were just tons of turnovers. 5 turnovers for North Texas, 3 turnovers for USF. That's probably what led to all these points, giving people short fields. But they absolutely dominated this game. It didn't really look like it early on. Then they started to pull away and pull away and pull away. I was in the movie theater watching Tron at the second half of this game. Great visual movie, by the way. The storyline is, kind of is what it is. I think that franchise is a little played out at this point, but fantastic visuals and fantastic music. Go check it out if you like that stuff. But yeah, super lopsided game. I'm glad we were on the right side of that. I told you that North Texas kind of their parade is over. They're going to get to the meat and potatoes of their schedule, and things are going to start to become more real worldly for them. Whereas South Florida was tested, they had everything in front of them. They were controlling their own destiny, and that kind of played out exactly how we were expecting. So the next game, that was it for Thursday, Friday. Then we moved into Saturday. Started out with Ohio State minus 13.5. They dominated Illinois. Illinois hanging there a little bit, but obviously wasn't enough. Ohio State's just on another level. And you might ask, well, if they're on another level, then why are they number 1? Well, in your top 10. Well, they're not number 1 in my top 10 because I think when they finally play somebody that is like legit talented and can legit hang with them, it's going to be a little bit different. But 13.5 against Illinois, who had already kind of had a bad loss. I think it was kind of hanging around in their head a little bit. It just is what it is. You kind of have to look into the numbers and get into the weeds in that game to really predict that. But we were on the right side, which was good. Alabama minus 2.5. That was a tight game. That came down to, obviously Missouri had the ball last with the chance to win the game. But again, exactly as I expected, they were going to hang in there. And then as Alabama started to pull away, Drinkwitz was going to crack under pressure. Prabula, who's a new quarterback on the scene, was going to crack under pressure because he can't throw as much as he wants to and he can't run as much as he wants to. And things started to happen for him. That's why you see at the very end, the game ends on an interception because they put themselves in a position where they had to force throws. They had to hurry up. They're just not. It's not the offense they're comfortable running. So that kind of played out exactly how we predicted. And at that point, man, I was as confident as I have ever been on the remainder of prediction list as I've ever been. And then Ole Miss happened. And I won't spend too much time on that game because, again, I've already said I think there's a lot about that game that people don't understand. People aren't looking at it this way, but that is a classic look-ahead spot. Lane Kiffin admitted on Sunday after the LSU game 2 weeks prior that they were spending Monday and Tuesday on Georgia. and then the rest of the time they're going to talk about and recruit and scout Washington State. So obviously there was probably a little bit more Georgia scouting in those 2 weeks than what he actually said and admitted, which is fine, because if it works out and we beat Georgia, then I don't care if we beat Washington State by half a point. It's not even possible, but I wouldn't care because in today's world, a win is a win is a win. So obviously, hate to not live up to expectations there, but 32 points, 11 a.m. on a sleepy look-ahead spot, it just wasn't destined to be, but I'm never going to predict against my team. I'm just not. I don't have that. I don't have that in my nature. If I genuinely felt very unconfident in their performance, then I just wouldn't put their prediction on the show. I just wouldn't talk about it. But if you asked me, I would say I predict that they're going to cover, because that's just what I do. But I put them on there because I genuinely thought the way that we matched up, that there was no reason why we couldn't beat them by 33 points. It just didn't work out that way. And again, if we beat Georgia this week, I'm not going to have a word to say about it anymore. So that kind of stunk, especially in retrospect like that. That could have totally changed our day from 10-3 to 10-2. Doesn't sound like a lot, but 10-2 is so rare in this industry where you're trying to predict these games on a large scale. But anyway, it was fine. I told myself we got the win. If my predictions continue to go out the way they are so far, then I'm not really going to care all that much, and it did, so I don't. Indiana +7. That was such a good game, such an awesome game to watch. They went into Oregon and they just totally kept their wits about them. They went in there and they battled their butts off. I heard somebody say today that it was really kind of impressive, the fact that they gave up a pick six to tie the game, and it's like it didn't even faze them. Like it didn't even matter. It was a second half pick six to tie the game, and it was like, who cares? Just keep going. Keep doing your thing, because those things happen, man. Interceptions happen. Fumbles happen. It's not an indictment on the player. It has nothing to say about the skill of the player. It's just bound to happen, and it happened to them, and they could not have moved on from that quicker. And they played as good of a game as they can ask for against a really good Oregon team on the road. Got the win. And I think that's the reason why they are very high in just about every ranking you can find. So again, we were kind of expecting a close game. I'm not going to say we expected them to win the game, but we were definitely expecting a close game, and we got it. So that was great. Texas -2.5. Now, hand up. I'm not going to take credit for that entirely. I took a lot of influence from other people who are in this industry and doing exactly what I'm doing, except they're doing it for a lot of money. As in, they get paid a full-time salary that is probably double or triple what I make in a year to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And there's a couple people, specifically one person, Josh Pate, out there, who felt as confident as he's ever felt in a game this year. Quote to him, that's what he said. And I'm not one to doubt him all that often. And so I told myself, I said, man, if he's going to make a prediction like this, then I have no choice but to believe him. So what I did from that, instead of just taking that and saying, hey, guys, Josh says it's going to be Texas, so that's what we're taking. I said, Josh says it's going to be Texas. So here's the research that I found that proves why that's probably a good prediction. And it worked out. So we'll move on from that one because I don't want to take too much credit for that. Georgia Tech -14. I'm a Georgia Tech truther. I love their team. I love their style of play. They're gritty. They're hard-nosed. They're bully ball. Haynes King runs. He throws. He does a little bit of everything. He's like Jackson Dart reincarnated at the college level, where he just takes hits after hit after hit. There's no such thing as slide in his game. And they have a really good running back to back it up, so I think they're really deep. And I think they're going to be hard to beat in every game this year. But there's a couple of teams on their schedule, like Virginia Tech this weekend, where you just kind of figured, there's just no way they don't blow this team out. They're so much better than this team. They're at home. I mean, they have all this working for them. I saw that game going no other way than how it went, and it did, so that was great. And then the last two losses of the day were Tennessee, which against the spread and then outright's a lot different. So, you can hear me say that and say, well, but you had them in your top 10 for the first time all year. And it's like, yeah, because they passed their test. They won the game. That's really what matters, because, because they don't crown the national champion based off of the spread in the national championship game. If Ohio State is favored by 3 points in the national championship game and they win by 1, they don't say, well, you're not the national champion. It's to the team over here that covered. We always say the famous saying, Good teams win, great teams cover. I do believe that because there is part of this industry that is living up to your expectations by the people who set them forth for you. So although they did not do that, that is why I have them in the top 10. But for the game, we had first quarter minus 4.5. They have not failed on a first quarter spread all year up until this point. And then Tennessee minus 9.5, which they fell short of at the very end. Had a chance to close it out playing defense on the last drive, and they let Arkansas score a late touchdown, which ultimately was not going to lose the game for them, which is part of the reason why I think it happened. But it's just one of those where you can. There's coaches that have said this before. They would much rather end the game with their offense rather than their defense. It just works out. You get offenses that are scrapping and grasping at straws at the very end of the game. They tend to outplay and out execute your defense. That just knows we just got to make it through 5 more minutes. And that's just kind of how it is. So when Arkansas got the ball at the end of the game, and I knew it was going to be their last chance, and they had to stop them to cover, I kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going to work out, especially after how the first quarter went. But the first quarter was just, a little bit of a lot of different things, but I think it was a mixture of Arkansas was super motivated to play after they, lose their head coach, a new way of doing things for them with a new coach at the helm, even if it is an interim. So I think sometimes you really don't know what you're going to get out of teams like that. So we really didn't know what we were going to get out of Arkansas. We had expectations for sure. Just didn't work out. I mean, and I think Arkansas-Tennessee is kind of a quiet rivalry. It's not Tennessee-Alabama, and it's surely not, Arkansas-LSU or Arkansas-Missouri. It just isn't that. But there definitely is a rivalry there. So I think sometimes that fuels things outside of their expectations, and that's what happened here. So that put us at 3 losses for the day, but then we wrapped up at night with 3 wins, and so that was Texas A&M minus 7.5. You just had to expect Florida to kind of be in a letdown spot after the game against Texas last week. They had a super influential, exciting, kind of high emotion win against Texas the week prior. That gave a lot of people confidence down in Florida, and then you kind of have to come off of that and play another really good team. And so we just kind of expected Texas A&M to continue their trends, whereas Florida and the state of their program kind of to drop off of that high that they were on. So that worked out to our favor, and Texas A&M was the home team at night. It's just hard to do that, hard to lose games like that for an A&M caliber team. Texas Tech minus 14 honestly wasn't a surprise for me. I've talked up Texas Tech as much as anybody. And I've said before that I really believe in them and I really love to watch them play. I love their style of play because it fits my entertainment factor, and they've been nothing but impressive. I just think if you do this long enough, you just know, again, I'll say this all the time, letdown spots and look ahead spots. They're real. They happen every week to somebody. And I think this was just a little bit of man, Texas Tech is just rolling. They're just rolling and rolling. And they're playing, decent team after decent team. And at some point, they're not saying they're going to lose, but at some point, this high has to come to an end, to the point where they kind of get brought back into reality a little bit. So although I predicted Texas Tech in this game, it just didn't happen. They completely just blew Kansas out of the water. And when I was watching that game, man, there was a lot of explosive plays. I think that's the key to a national championship, is be able to have multiple explosive plays in a game. The stats would back that up in past national championship teams. And, Texas Tech, man, who knows who's going to stop them? I'm not really sure. It may not be anybody in the Big 12, that's for sure. And don't say BYU just because they're 6-0, because BYU's played nobody. So that was good. I won't say expected, but it was what we hoped, and it worked out. And then last game of the night, Georgia minus 3, and I don't have enough time on this podcast to get into that game in depth. The officiating was terrible. There's been difference in opinion on the Kirby Smart timeout / clapping thing. He's doing, if you're on YouTube, you can see he's doing this clear as day on camera. And he claims he was clapping. I've heard some people say you need to enforce the rules and you need to live up to, hey, if you're the referee, you called a timeout for him. You can't let him back you down off of that. And then I've heard the other side say, Referees pick up flags all the time where they call a penalty and then they talk about it and they say, you know what? No, it wasn't a penalty. And there's nothing different about this situation. However, I think this affects an outcome a little bit more. I think he made a mistake. You got to make him live up to that. You got to make him reap the consequences. If it was another coach, you wonder how it would have worked out, if it would have been the same result. But that was just one of many things that went down in that game as far as officiating is concerned. It was the slowest game of all time, I think, because of the officiating. Nobody wants to see that. Everybody wants a fair game. Everybody wants games to be called correctly. But there comes a time where, as an officiating crew, I think you need to just accept, like, this is going to be a sloppy game. It's going to be a physical game. And we can call the egregious stuff, but we got to let some stuff go. And they needed to let some stuff go. And if they would have done that, they probably would have went another direction. But ultimately, Georgia pulls it out. And, man, we went 10-3. That's crazy, man. Best week of the season. Obviously, we expect to do something similar to that every week. But to be realistic and to, have some sort of humbleness to ourselves, we can't say that that's an every week occurrence. So, obviously, that's why we're super excited about it. We put a new graphic out just for that, and we're going to post this episode out in different channels just because of that, because we want people to know about it. So what a fun weekend, man. It was awesome, and hope to have some more of those. So we're at the 50-minute mark, so let's wrap it up here with next week, or I guess this week's games that we have selected. Eventually, at some point, I will put my spreadsheet out on the show so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Because I got, you look at this spreadsheet, there's colors everywhere, there's words everywhere. I mean, it's all over the place. It's part of the reason why I have not shown it yet on the show for everybody to see. But just trust me when I say there's a little bit of chaos going on. But the best part is I know where everything is and I know how to read it. But it's a long one, but what we do is typically on Monday, we will go through and we will pick out every game that we could potentially predict based off of entertainment value and what we know about the teams that are playing. And then usually we will filter some of those out before Thursday when we make our official predictions. Because if you also, this is a good example, like if you follow us on Twitter, there were, I think, 2 or 3 games that we posted on Twitter before they happened that, hey, we're going to back our prediction out of this because there's other factors at play here, or there's new knowledge for us where it's just like, hey, I don't want my reputation to be on the line because of something I said 4 days ago or 3 days ago or 2 days ago, whatever. Like, we have new information. As much as I would love to put the show out on Saturday morning where I recorded it Saturday morning, edit it, post it, and all the information is as fresh as possible, it's not a luxury that we have. So I'm starting to get better about communicating that and saying, hey, we made this prediction on Thursday. It's Saturday afternoon before the primetime slate, and we feel a little bit different about this, so we're going to take it back. It would be a lot easier if I was putting official picks out and I was making actual, I was actually gambling on this stuff, but I'm not, so I can't just say, I've got the proof to say I'm not taking this game, but I don't. The only proof I have is this podcast. So when I say I predict this happening, there's really no better way for me to say I'm going to back out of this other than to just say I'm going to back out of this. So we did that for a couple games for our own personal, but as far as if you just listened on Thursday and that was it, then you can still take it to heart that we were 10-3 based off what we said, which was great. We should have stuck in with a couple of those that we backed out, but we did. So that's kind of how this works. So obviously this card's really big. It's got a lot of games on it. And some of them might not make it to Thursday. That's all what I'm basically trying to say. So we will start, however, with 3 games we have locked in that will not change. We are going to take the number that we are given as of today, and we will not back them out no matter what happens because we locked them in for the show. Now, this is part of the reason why I get you guys to listen on Tuesday is so you can get those early predictions, early locks. And so these will not change. So let's talk about those first. Louisville at Miami. And I've actually already done the research on these, the same amount of research, the same type of research I would normally do on Thursday. So I have my notes right here. Louisville at Miami. Miami minus 12.5. Let me just go ahead and rip this off. All right. Now I can talk closer to the mic. Louisville at Miami. Miami minus 12.5. This game is on a Friday, which you do know if you listen to the show, it definitely makes us feel a little bit different about things. But in this game, I think you'll see why we don't here. The SRS model has Miami at a 25. For new listeners, that is the simple rating system. That is a stat you can find on College Football Reference. And what that does is it takes your point differential in games and couples it with your strength of schedule and basically spits out a number to say, for example, here, Miami at a 25. That means that if Miami played an average team that was run of the mill, nothing special about them, just any other team on a neutral site, they would be expected to win by 25 points. So it is a very good number to have handy. So 25 for Miami, 13 for Louisville. That is a massive gap, a 12-point gap. So that's basically saying, hey, if Louisville and Miami are playing on a neutral site tomorrow, Miami would be favored by 12 points. Well, lo and behold, they're a 12.5-point favorite at home. And you wonder where Vegas gets some of these numbers. Strength of schedule has Miami at a 9 and Louisville at a 1. So they are very average on strength of schedule. And Miami is top 5. In some of these, not like the strength of schedule and the SRS number, they are top 5 in both of those. So very, very impressive resume so far. Both of these teams are scoring around 35 points a game. And Miami has only given up 13 points per game defensively, which is top 10 in the country. Miami obviously has a much more impressive resume, beating Notre Dame, USF, Florida, and at Florida State. And Louisville, really their best 2 games were at Pitt, where they won by 1 possession, and then Virginia, where they just lost 2 weeks ago at home to Virginia. So there's a lot there. I mean, you could probably make the prediction based off of that information alone. But some more stuff to take note of here. Both of these teams are coming off of a bye. So that does a couple things for you. Number one, it does get you healthy. And it does get you rest. But one thing it does is it gets you rusty. And if I'm a rusty team, I don't want to be coming off of a bye week playing Miami. Now, if you're Miami, you'd say Louisville's a good test coming out of a bye week. Going to test how much we prepared and how well we were ready for this game. However, if you're Louisville and you're like, crap, we spent the last 2 weeks at home just playing ourselves really in practice and in scrimmages, not like game time simulation type things. And now we got to go on the road to Miami on a short week on Friday night. I mean, that alone puts us, you can probably see where this is going. Miami covers over 80% of the time. Louisville covers less than 40% of the time. Carson Beck is at a 73% completion percentage and leads the ACC with 11 touchdowns so far. He's averaging 264 yards in the air and 163 yards. He's averaging 264 yards in the air with 2 touchdowns per game passing. And Miami as a team is averaging 163 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns per game on the ground. So they're averaging 4 touchdowns a game. Very, very impressive. I don't know that Louisville will have anything to hold that off, at least to its full extent. Miami's defense is forcing a 59% completion rate from quarterbacks and allowing less than 1 rushing touchdown per game. They are averaging 0.4 rushing touchdowns per game defensively, which is super impressive. Kind of shows you there that Louisville, no matter what they throw at them, Miami has the ability to stop you in multiple ways. They can stop you in the air or the ground. So they're showing a balanced defense. Miami does not turn the ball over. They are averaging less than 1 turnover per game. And Louisville has Miller Moss. He's got 7 touchdowns on the year, which is not all that bad. In the ACC, it's definitely not all that impressive at all. But he's got 4 interceptions so far through 5 games. So definitely not a stat to write home about. And, really, like, this game is like a test of, like, is Miami even human at this point? I mean, you talk about, like, teams like Ohio State and Indiana that are just exceeding, and Texas Tech, they're just exceeding and exceeding and exceeding. Like, they have no flaws. They don't do anything wrong. And it's like, this is the game for Miami to say, we are part of that group single-handedly. We don't make mistakes. We beat teams when we're supposed to beat teams. So, yeah, I wrote this down, like, are they even human? So that's where we are here. So we're going to lock in Miami minus 12.5 for this. And another reason why we're doing this is because that number is going to go up. If you just take my word for it, when you hear from us on Thursday, you will see that number is closer to 14 than it is 12.5. So we'll see that. So that's why, again, we want to jump on that number and take advantage of it. The next game we had was Georgia Tech at Duke. Duke is favored by 3 points. Why? It beats me, man. I don't know. On the SRS scale, and Georgia Tech is a 13, Duke is an 11, so they're only separated by 2 points in that regard. And both of their strength of schedules are close to zero, very similar. Both teams are scoring 36 points per game, and they're both giving up about 3 touchdowns per game, which does sound concerning. But the promising part is they're very similar. There's not one lopsided part of that. There's not one lopsided number. And then the edge I think you have is Georgia Tech has beat Clemson. They beat Wake, who has a good defense on the road. When they were really tested, they were down. It took every ounce of might to get through that game for them, and they made it happen. And then they just came off of a game against Virginia Tech where they flexed their muscles a little bit. Whereas Duke, on the other side, you have a loss to Illinois and a loss to Tulane, which are your 2 best games of the year, 2 best competition scales so far up to this point, and they failed both. They failed the Illinois game miserably. That was a home game when everybody was believing this was their time to shine. Illinois was top 10 in the country at that time, and Illinois went in and absolutely dominated Duke at home. And the Tulane game was just simply Tulane's the better team. Tulane was a better team then. Tulane's a better team now than Duke. So when you're comparing Georgia Tech and Duke, Georgia Tech is the better team in every aspect, and we'll break it down a little bit more. Duke is coming off of a bye, whereas Georgia Tech just played last week, so Georgia Tech is fresh. They're playing really well right now. Again, they've far and away come off of that Wake Forest, overtime win, and now they're getting things rolling again. They're starting to beat teams like they're supposed to. Duke is coming off of a bye, so very similar to Louisville. Do you really want to come off of a bye and play a team of that caliber? No, you don't. Ole Miss would answer that question for you. They were very, very grateful that they came off of a bye and played Washington State and not another SEC team. But this is a conference matchup. Georgia Tech's one of the best teams in the ACC, probably behind Miami, and that's who Duke has to face off against, whether they're at home or not. Georgia Tech is covering more than 80% of the time. Darian Mensah and Duke is around 500 there in that category. Darian Mensah, the quarterback for Duke, does lead the ACC in touchdowns with 15, but that's promising, sure. But last time Georgia Tech played a somewhat competent high-level quarterback was Cade Klubnik, and they kept him to 200 yards in the air, which it sounds great. It's not all that impressive for a quarterback that's supposed to be one of the best in the country at a great program. If you limit a guy like that to 200 yards in the air, you're doing something right. He only had 1 touchdown in that game and 1 interception in that game versus Georgia Tech, so I don't see any reason why they can't do the same against Mensah with Duke. And then the last time Duke played dual threat quarterbacks was, again, the games we've already talked about. They played Illinois with Luke Altmaier, who can do just about everything against you. They lost that game by almost over 30 points. And then they played Retzlaff at Tulane and lost that game on the road by a full possession. So this is not a full possession we're talking about here in this game. This is 3 points. You're actually giving 3 points to Georgia Tech. So they get that head start. Duke's defense allows 250-plus pass yards per game. They are averaging 1 touchdown given up in the air per game, and then they're giving up over 100 yards on the ground per game and 2 – what does that even say? My handwriting is terrible. 2.3 touchdowns on the ground per game. So they are giving up touchdowns in multiple levels. And so I think you get Haynes King in there, and he's going to flex his muscles a little bit. Hopefully lives up to expectations there. Duke is averaging 1 turnover per game, so you're almost guaranteed to turn the ball over at some point, which obviously is a huge momentum swinger. Georgia Tech defense allows less than 200 yards in the air and less than 160 yards on the ground. So if they can do that here, I think there's no way they can't win this game. And the last 2 things I'll say on this is, number one, we say this every week when we predict underdogs against the spread, is if you're going to predict an underdog against the spread, you have to believe they can win outright. So if I'm going to predict Georgia Tech +3, then I believe they can win outright. And I don't just believe they can win outright, I'm predicting them to win outright. But for the sake of our prediction and our reputation, just in case this thing goes south, I'm going to predict Georgia Tech +3. I'm going to take the 3 points you're giving me, and I'm going to use them. And then the very last thing I have on that game is, if this game is gross, it's Georgia Tech. There's just no way that this game is gross and Duke finds a way to win. Because number one, Georgia Tech has played a gross game already this year against Wake Forest, and they found a way to win. When up until going into the last couple minutes of fourth quarter, nobody believed they were going to do it because they hadn't proven they were going to do it in that game all day. And they found a way to do it. So if they can win a gross game, Duke has played gross games this year, and they don't win. It's just that simple. So if you're going to say, hey, these teams are going to come out sloppy, they're not going to do things right, the game's not going to be all that entertaining, there's no way you can tell me and predict that Georgia Tech doesn't win the game. So the third lock that we have already taken is Memphis. We're going to be really short on this one. Memphis minus 19.5 at UAB. UAB just fired Trent Dilfer, as we said earlier. So UAB already a not great football team. They have lost as many games as they've won so far. And so coming off of like a program like that in the state that they're in, and now they just fired their head coach, they have no direction, they have no trajectory. And coming into town, who you got? You got the number one G5 team in the country right now in Memphis. And 19.5 on the road seems like a lot. And again, we talked about with Arkansas, sometimes you don't really know what you're going to get from an interim coach. I just don't know that UAB has the talent to stack up against Memphis, even at their best. And the last thing on that is, listen, not only is Memphis undefeated, but they're undefeated against the spread, and they are covering the spread by more points than anybody in the country. They lead the nation in points covered by. So you talk about Texas Tech like doubling every spread. Well, Memphis is like doubling and tripling every spread. They are covering by leaps and bounds. So for that, we're going to lock in that number at, 19.5, because I think it's going to be closer to 21 or 21.5 by Saturday. So we're going to take advantage of those couple extra points. And that is our three locks. Because of time, we will leave our card for Thursday. So we will go through the entire card on Thursday. Thursday's show is nothing but predictions. You don't have to listen to me ramble about trajectory of programs. You don't have to listen to me ramble about coaches getting fired. You don't have to listen to me talk about my top 10 that has no value as far as the college football playoff goes. This is all just a show to kind of recap things that have been going on. But Thursday is going to be strictly predictions. We got another huge card. We got another big Saturday. There's a lot of great matchups, and we are looking forward to it mightily. And we've got some great ones. Obviously, the biggest one of the weekend, Georgia playing Ole Miss at home. So obviously, we will have lots to say there. But with that, we will close out today's show. As we always say at the very end, we really, really appreciate all the support. There is a select few of you who watch every single episode from front to back, and I could not appreciate you guys more. You guys know who you are because I tell you every week how thankful I am. And one good thing that we have seen is our numbers are slowly going up. About a couple of listeners every show. I don't care if you watch on YouTube or listen on podcast or, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, however you get your podcast, you can get this one. And so however you seek to do it, we appreciate it. So thank you very much. With that, we will wrap up our Week 7 recap show and see you on Thursday for Week 8 predictions. See you guys later. Hotty toddy.